I'm Derek Wheatley, and welcome to episode 81 of the Weekly Wheatley podcast. As always, thanks very much for everyone who's tuning in today and who tuned into the previous episode. I'd like to thank Neil O'Merku for coming on and telling us about Wim Hof and all his adventures. And obviously, Neil has followed up on that. He's a level 3 Wim Hof instructor. If you're interested in kind of cold water exposure and all the things that go along with that, it's a great chat. So if you get a chance, have a look at it or have a listen to it, whichever you prefer. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you would. That'd be great. It's always helpful. We've had some people jump on recently as well, so it's kind of totted it up a bit, and it helps us all. So let's get on with it. I'm going to introduce my guest today, I had to cut some of his stuff down. He does so much stuff. He is a physical artist. He's a coach, an author, and an expert on and here's my French, Sear wheel. My guest today is Ronan Brady. How are you doing, Ronan?
Great, Derek. Thanks very much.
How was the French?
Did good on the Sear wheel there.
Do you know what? Like, I obviously knew you did this, so I went in to find out what exactly this wheel was called, and I saw CYR, and I thought, right, okay, I don't know how to pronounce that, so I typed it in how to pronounce it, and there was this beautiful French accent came out of my phone with the Sear wheel, and I thought, oh, of course, it's something that I can't pronounce. But as long as you think I did all right with it, I'm happy.
I think I get it wrong as well. I think it's just the Irish accent just can't do justice to what it is. So I just call it a wheel.
Yeah, okay. He's an expert on the wheel.
Yeah.
So, Ronan, let's get going. So could you give us a short history of your upbringing, please?
Short history on my upbringing. Born in Dublin, lived in Dublin for a year or two, moved to Ballina. Lived in Ballina for a year or two, and then moved home to Corrigan in Roscommon, and spent the majority of my childhood on a small farm, 30 or 40 cattle, kind of 50, 60 acres, sucklers, living in a big family. I've got 4 brothers, all twins, so 2 sets of twins, and then I've got 2 sisters, and I'm the second eldest. And I grew up in this kind of wonderful, chaotic mayhem that was a large country house in the middle of nowhere. You went outside and you didn't see your parents from one part of the day to the next, and there was always something to be done. You're always like either playing hard or working hard, and if you weren't at that, you were gone off doing sports or whatever. And had a really good childhood, I would right. say. And that's where I lived until probably going into my leaving cert year, and then we moved going into the leaving cert year, and then did that and went to college, and now we're here in Athlone.
Yeah, I really started to appreciate cattle when I moved out from the town out to where I am now in the country, and like I've spoken about this there recently. I have a deep love for calves and cows now, and the movement and how I relax, like it helps me relax to watch them just strolling around or chewing the cud or whatever they do. I've never thought about it as much, maybe in the last 2 or 3 years, that when I've really learned to appreciate an animal at all, it's been the cow, I think.
Really?
Yeah, honestly. I just find them, I don't know, I just find them so fascinating. It's not just the movement as well. It's the way they'll just stare you out of it. Like they'll just absolutely stare right through you sometimes. And obviously they're doing it for a reason. They want something or whatever it might be. But then the calves are the most beautiful kind of smaller animals, we'll say. And yeah, I've just really grown to kind of appreciate them a lot more. And they're they're kind of my friends now out on the farm, you know. I love it. I honestly do. I honestly love it. So
sometimes I look at an animal and like how complicated our human lives can be, and how we kind of try to give it meaning and wonder what it's all about and why. And then you see a cow, and it gets up in the morning and it eats some food and it feeds its calf and it stares into space and it goes to sleep and it does it, and it's like, you know, has that animal's life any less meaning than our own? And are they much better off?
Yeah. No, you're right. Do you know, and I think, do you know what it is, Ronan? I think what it is with cows is we're surrounded by them, in this country. Like, they're everywhere. But I think that's what kind of has amazed me, that I never thought about them, never looked at them, never, batted my eyelid at them until I moved out to a farm that surrounds me. And now it's kind of, I have a different appreciation for what they do. And you're right, like they go about their business in a very kind of, kind of lazy but chilled kind of a vibe, and I love it. I think it's great, and I that's my take on cows. So everybody, I'm sure everybody's.
Are you a townie then, Derek? Did you grow up
Yeah. Like I'd be from the center of town. It just if people know Athlone, it's actually quite close to the hospital where I grew up, and then I was in Swords. I lived in Swords then went to school in Swords. So again, considered a village, but it's a big enough. It's bigger than that now, obviously. But
you didn't just discount the cows; you discounted the farmers themselves.
Do you know what?
Cultures and everything that goes with that.
Yeah. Do you know what? I've been called out, and I deserve to be called out. To be honest, and do you know what? You're actually right. Like, because I remember when we were kids, we drive up and down to Athlone because my dad was here. So Mama would bring us down and bring us back up. And obviously on the old roads, not the kind of roads that are there now, the dual carriageways and that, and the motorway. It is a farmland, a lot of it, And you're right. I was like busy listening to Nirvana instead of looking out windows and appreciating what the farmers are doing for the country. And I've been shamed this morning, and I deserve it. So
but on the flip side of that, Derek, we discounted the townies. They were like soft, didn't know what real work was. They'd like flinch at the smell of cow shit, and wouldn't want to get their hands dirty, and their skin was soft, and they just they wouldn't like standing out in the rain like we would. They wouldn't be able for it.
You're absolutely right, and that's exactly what we're like. So now we've figured that one out. So on to the next. So another thing. So we always ask this, Ronan, because it's obviously part of the podcast and the mental health side of things. When did you first become aware of mental health?
That's a really great question, and it's something that when I thought back about the question, it probably wasn't mental health that it was like packaged as, but more mental toughness, or like from a sports psychology standpoint, and that was the only time and the first time that I kind of came across a mental health, or training your mind to be a certain way, to be tough, to endure, or to anticipate. And it was all in a sporting context, like to anticipate when you might be down, or if you make a mistake, how to just kind of brush it aside and focus on the next thing, because what's past is not useful anymore. So it was probably from a sports psychology standpoint, and that would have been probably 18, 19, early 20s, kind of that stage when county things were kind of looking into it quite deep. And what's funny is that I never, not consciously anyway, but you'd have never taken what you'd have learned from a sports context and put it into like a personal kind of a context. So even though I was exposed to it and kind of worked on it and was very good at it in a sporting context, it's not as easy to put in place in everyday life or in personal things. No more than yourself when you were talking about asking people to come on the podcast. It's like every time you do it, it gets easier, and then all of a sudden you don't think about it, but then someday you might get a big no, and a no that you might have been really looking forward to, and you're knocked back again. And even though all those things that you've kind of put into practice, and you understand something, but it still feels hard to do, So probably from a sports psychology perspective was my first encounter in it. And then I suppose as it became kind of more of a deal in society, to look after your mental health. And it's a little bit, it's hard because everyone will say it, but then to get down into the nuts and bolts of it and what works for people and what you can do, and if people will do things without actually sharing them with other people, because it could be still stigmatized, or it would be looked upon as a weakness to have any kind of mental health issues. But yeah, that was probably my first exposure to it and to see like parallels in the real world. I never joined those two together until I started working on it in the real world, and then I like, oh wait, I've been doing this all along, and it's like trying to put them together, you know.
Yeah, and you were an inter-county player, weren't you, for Roscommon?
Yeah, once upon a time, yeah.
And what was that? When you were with Roscommon, was there a kind of a system in place at that time for people who may have been, you know, struggling with their mental health?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Yeah, we had a sports psychologist, and she was also a counselor. And one of the approaches that management team would have had was to try and get everything else in your life mainstream, like sort of streamlined, so that when you're playing your sport, you're not worried about what's going on in the background. So they were very much proactive in kind of, you know, how the students were doing in college, if they needed extra help in studying, or if it would have been like after the kind of 2008 economic crash, and if lads were out of work and self-employed, and could they get those lads jobs someplace else, or how were there for money and things. And it was just about kind of alleviating all those day-to-day stresses, so that when you were playing your sport, there was kind of nothing else going on there. So that was kind of fantastic. And I never looked at it from that kind of perspective. Like often sport was the escape. You know, it wasn't like we had to have everything in life perfect, but sport was the moment that you could kind of get away from all the shit that was going on. And sometimes the shit might have fueled it. You know, sometimes the anger that you would have from something in your personal life would help you be a certain player on the field. So
yeah,
but their approach was definitely a really good approach.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Could you do me a favor, Ronan? Could you come out and come back in, because you've paused on my screen for some time now, and I don't know why that is. Thank you very much. I'll fill in. For people who haven't listened to our episode with Niall Morgan, who is the Tyrone goalkeeper, he spoke a lot about the systems in place for mental health in the GAA, and it's such a positive thing. And I'm kind of surprised, I suppose, to hear from Ronan telling us about, you know, it was back in place in 2008. So it's a brilliant thing to have, you know, because it's such a high level sport. And when we talk about Roland's back, but when we talk about that in the sense of when we see yesterday, I was actually watching the Cork game yesterday, and the levels of intensity of that sport in general, and it's just how important it is to have those things in place. Because when we're talking about like amateur athletes going out in front of, like in a normal, say, situation, going out in front of 90,000 people, the stress levels must be through the roof. Like, and you will have to, for you, when you played for Roscommon, like, how were you in dealing with playing in front of people? Were you okay with it, or was there ever times where you did kind of struggle with
it? No, the times that you would struggle with it, I think, is probably for most things. This is how it was for me, in the anticipation and the build-up and the lead into it. Once the whistle goes and you're playing. Like, once there's a job to be done and a task to be done, and then you realize, oh no, I've trained for this, I prepared for this, I know what I'm doing. Like, everything kind of surrounding that disappears. You know, you don't even hear the people that are shouting at you. You know, it's very seldom that you would hear what somebody's saying unless there's been like a lull in something. But when you're kind of in the thick of things, none of that kind of impacts, or none of that ever affected me anyways. But yeah, always the lead in, always the anticipation, how the body was, if you've got like a niggle, or if you've got a knock, or all of that stuff, just kind of in the preparation. You know, you'd be worried, like small things like what kind of foods you might eat beforehand, or if you had a coffee, or if you had to go to, like, time and even going to the toilet before you had to go, like, to the game. You know, it's all these small things. And we worked really hard on making sure that these small things didn't affect us. You know, you have spare laces in your gear bag just in case the lace goes in your football boots before the match. And it's like all these small things. You always had a spare pair of something, you know, and you had spare boots in case it rained in the middle of a game and the six stud was the moley was no good anymore, and you needed a six stud. And it was like removing all the the places in where errors can occur, or even these like small little superstitions that people might have. And I never had them, but you know, these little things that could upset you kind of on the way through. You mentioned the Cork game yesterday. Was it I think it was the Limerick lads, you know, they got caught up in a bale of hay, like there was bales of hay came off a lorry or something on the road up, like, and so that probably upset the Waterford lads more than it did the Limerick lads. Because when you go into those scenarios as well, actually, like when you go into Croke Park, everything is timetabled to the minute, down to the very minute. You've got like 27-minute warm up, 3 minutes like to get from here to there, like hour on a Veen lasts whatever duration. So like, you know what you're doing to the second. And all of a sudden Waterford were there half an hour before, you know, they were there on time, and now the game was put back half an hour. So they probably had more to deal with there because they had
it's so funny to hear you talk about those little things that, you know, if they happen, they would be catastrophe, even though it's a small thing. But, you know, I don't know how many times we've talked about what anxiety is like on this, you know, podcast, but it reminds me so much of that, the way you describe, like, what if I need to go to the toilet at that moment? And it's these tiny little things, and they'll add up so much because one thing knocks on to the next thing, like a domino effect.
Yeah.
And it's trying to plan for all those things without giving it any chance without giving you any chance to realize that something could happen. Like, you can't control every single circumstance. And like you talked about the hurling, that's just a freak kind of occurrence that goes on that you can't control. And it's funny when you don't think about those things as a fan or as a viewer watching the footballers or the hurlers play. It's bad to hear those from someone who has an anxiety disorder, to kind of hear those kind of little things that could fall you off. But so what, like, I'm interested in kind of finding out where the line came, where the kind of intercounty football kind of came to a stop, and what you do now came to a start. Like, was there a crossover at some point?
Yeah, there was. It was very much an injury. I got injured.
Okay.
I got injured playing football, and I had to take a year out from. It was either getting an injection into the pelvis, and it was something that may or may not work, and there was risks of infection. And I think around the same time I got it, Paul O'Connell had it, and he had got the injection, and he had ended up with an infection or something. I was like, oh fuck it, it's not worth risking. And I think subconsciously I wanted the break anyways. I've been playing ball. I've been in development panels from like the age of probably 15 up until 25. And that's like, even though you're still a young senior player, you'd been in it a decade, and I was quite focused and driven towards it. So I was like trying to gain every inch I could, and I was very competitive. So I think I was a little bit, I suppose, jaded and tired with it anyways. And the injury was an overtraining injury, which might suggest in itself that I was overdoing it. But I had always got a curiosity towards like anything and everything else. Like, when I was growing up, we had a computer, and we had like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2 or something but like, you had never envisaged getting a skateboard because there was nowhere you could use it. Like, we didn't have concrete and tarmac now where I was growing up. We just had kind of gravel and cracked footpaths. So like, you know, you had no place to do it. So anything, and that would have like seemed quite alternative to me at the time. You know, there was just athletics, GA, and soccer probably is all that I would have had in my head. But I had been to Cirque du Soleil shows and seen the shows and been impressed always by just the feats of like human physicality and strength and beauty and grace, and had always wanted to try it. And so when this break was there, an old school teacher of mine, he was teaching how to do silks and climb ropes and that kind of circus style stuff. So I went down to him and did some classes down there to build up core strength to come back to football. And then that took me to a festival in Donegal that the Sierra Wheel just happened to be at. The first time I went to it, it was the first year that it was there. A lady flew in from Montreal, and she brought some wheels with her, and we learned we didn't learn how to do it, but we got a taste for it. And then no wheels existed here in Ireland, so I went and built one. And I
Oh.
was teaching in a school and that had a gym, like at a little kind of PE hall. And so I'm like, I'll just build one of these and I'll just start kind of fooling around with it on my own. Because up to that point, I suppose being involved in team sports, it's wonderful and amazing, but it also, there's so many variables which I was getting frustrated with, because I was driven and I was, whatever was to be won, I wanted to win it. And at the time we were doing really well with our club, Elfin, and we were competing in county finals. And the team that was beating us, St. Bridget's, like the team that was beating us was competing in All-Ireland finals and winning All-Ireland finals. And I was getting frustrated because I'm like, does everybody else not see that we're one of the best teams in the country, not just Roscommon, but like if we all come to here, like we could be All-Ireland champions, not just club champions and or like county champions. But we always kind of fell short, and I was getting frustrated with other people, and I was becoming this not kind of so nice person. So I just wanted to kind of remove myself from that for a while and see what it was I could achieve as an individual.
Because you described the Cirque du Soleil there and just seeing that and being amazed by it. The first time I met you, Ronan, you were in our gym in Fusion there, and so you were doing kind of aerial acrobatics. Would that be kind of a good description?
Yeah.
Okay, so I was just I've never seen it before in up close. So maybe you're about 12 feet off the ground, maybe more, and you're hanging by, and I'm just thinking to myself when you're doing it, like, because I'm just thinking upper body strength, and obviously you talk about core as well, but I'm thinking upper body strength because I have none, like, and I do try, but it's like I see some people are kind of blessed to have it, but when I see you with the one hand wrapped and you're doing your movements, I was amazed by it. So then I'm going into the CrossFit area, and I see people are kind of half turned looking at you. While we're doing the warm-ups, we're doing the stretches, whatever we're doing. And everybody's in the same boat, kind of thinking like nobody's ever seen something like that before, and how graceful is probably the best word that I can use for it. And just to see you do that kind of movement. How long have you been doing that and kind of, I suppose, building up to where you are now?
I probably started looking into it like maybe around the age of 26, 27, and I'm 33 now. So, but any of it is like, so what you see me do there was aerial straps.
Okay, yeah.
Aerial straps was something that I learned for a show. I didn't actually know how to do. Somebody had a set of straps and I was playing around with them. And I sent a little clip into this show. I was auditioning for a show and I sent them in the wheel and they were like, that's cool. What else do you have? And I was like, got fucking nothing else. And well, I didn't say that to them. So I'm like, what the fuck? What am I going to do here? And so these straps were there and I just did a big running circle around the room and just kind of lifted up in the air. And they were like, oh yeah, we'll have that too. And I was like, oh shit, I'm after selling something here now that I don't even know if I'm going to be able to do.
Yeah.
So at that point I needed to scramble and kind of figure it out. So I put myself in the position of needing to kind of come up with something. But like all that takes a lot of time and like consistent time. And that's kind of one of the most difficult things here in Ireland is there's not that many facilities in which to train that kind of thing. And it's always easier to train something if you're part of a community, and it's quite a small community and separated. There's places in Cork and Galway and Dublin and Belfast and Sligo there, but if you're not there, you kind of just need to either go there or kind of carve out your own kind of way, which is something that I needed to do at the start. You know, there wasn't a community where I was, and I was happy enough to kind of potter around on my own. And you know, at the time, even with the Sear wheel, I was thinking, well, nobody does this here in this country, and I never thought it was for somebody from Ireland, or let alone Ireland, Roscommon, you know. And I always thought these were these beautiful exotic creatures that were born into it, you know, into circus families or whatever. And but then I'm like, well, somebody has to be the first one, and and so I went about it that way, but with no pressure. I didn't ever mean to become a professional. I didn't ever. It was more of a hobby. I just wanted to do cool tricks in the wheel, and then I was like, oh, what would this be like to perform? And then it kind of just slowly and steadily kind of got someplace with consistent work and effort,
Yeah, and like I said, from what I've seen you do up close and what I've seen you do on videos, it's just kind of it's an amazing kind of tribute to obviously all the hard work you put in, but the creativity, which I want to talk about in a little bit. But what I'm going to do before that, I just want to go into I just want to read out an advert first, Ronan, and I'll tell you what, you've paused again, but I will say that the pause looks like the greatest pose. It's incredible how we've managed to capture that kind of pause. But do you want to jump out and come back in, and I'll just read out the ad while you do it?
Yeah, I'm moving on my side, so I'm like, oh no, what have I frozen as?
No, it's good. You'll see it. It's good. Go on. Okay. Fusion Training Centre, Monksland Athlone, a place to train in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, kickboxing, martial arts, and CrossFit. A great atmosphere with experienced coaches and a real sense of community. If you want to join the team, find us on Facebook at Fusion Training Centre or drop in for a chat. There we go. Fusion Training Centre, train like a warrior. Obviously, we're in full flow in there now. I was out for the week, so I'm coming back in. On Wednesday. It's Monday today, so I'm really looking forward to getting back in there and doing my training, because I miss a lot when I'm not there. And even the crack, and actually, I might just mention this to Ronan when he comes back. Yeah, Ronan, actually, I just wanted to ask you about, because I was just mentioning how I was off for a week from training and I missed the crack and that. Did you miss that side of things from the football when you kind of went on your own?
I did, yeah. Yeah, I did, absolutely, yeah. And like, I missed the combative kind of, and I missed all the impact in just men coming together in like I don't know, totally permissible collisions. You're allowed to do this, so it's wonderful.
Yeah.
And also the slagging and the banter that would take place inside in the dressing room and that, like, so very much missed that. But I was gone off on something else, and it was a very the kind of the circles I was finding myself in then, like, they were very different kind of conversations. I'd start slagging somebody about something, and the whole room would turn around and go, why would you say that to somebody? And I was like, oh shit, this is a completely different environment.
Yeah.
And which allowed me to learn an awful lot. So I was kind of intrigued by that as well. Like, I was like, Jesus, there's this whole different way of living, and way of thinking and way of being, and that was really interesting too. But I missed, like, I went back playing football there, like, when the pandemic kicked in and like everything shut down and football was allowed to happen. I was like, well, fuck, I'm getting back in there. Like, I just need to be like in a group of people. I needed like a community of some description, or a collective of people working towards a common goal. Like, that was kind of something that I was after as well. So because lockdown was lonely. Yeah,
and that's what I want to ask you, actually. How did you manage to train for what you do during lockdown?
Didn't.
Okay.
Didn't. For the first while, like, it was mad stressful. Like, you were like, Jesus Christ, like, this whole thing could open up at any point, and I'm going to have to try and do this thing that I used to do. But it was it was like a losing battle, because you couldn't train anywhere. You couldn't. And it's very specific as well. Like, even in the wheel, if you don't spin, you lose your kind of spin tolerance. So when you get back in it, you start feeling sick, and you just don't. It's something you need to be at all of the time. So yeah, I had to. That was kind of one major mental struggle. It was like, well, this is just the way things are. I can't actually train. Like, why are you putting pressure on yourself to do this thing? So I'm like, it will just be what it will be. And it's like, what can I do? Like, loads of walks. Like, you're just the amount of times I walked around the town and around the park, and jumped in the river for a swim, and it was just like, I was like, just do something else. It's like, maybe all this is over, and this is a shift to some other place, and right now you can't control it, so why stress about it?
Yeah, absolutely. Can you just describe, I suppose, the wheel for people who haven't seen it?
Yeah, the wheel it's what is it? It's like an 1.5 inch tube of aluminium, and it's maybe wrapped in a clear PVC, and it's just rolled in a perfect circle as to suit various people's heights. So if you were standing up straight and you made a fist on the top of your head, that's kind of the height of the wheel that you want, or a little bit more, and then you step inside it. Like I suppose Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man is kind of like an image that will give you a mental image of what it would look like, somebody standing inside a circle. And then, like, if you take a coin and spin it on the table, that's exactly what we're doing inside the steer wheel. And it's just kind of keeping momentum and motion going, and you can kind of control what it is that it's doing.
Yeah. And I think, so when you, because you told me about it after we spoke in Fusion about how to square a circle. What was the idea behind that?
How to square a circle. How to square a circle was two of us coming together and just trying to make a show. Like we were two circus artists who enjoy training together, and a friend of ours then says you should apply for some funding and try and make something. So you can apply to the Irish Arts Council for funding, and we did, and we got the funding, and all of a sudden we had to make something. We didn't know how to make a show. And so, like, How to Square a Circle was made twice. We made it the first time in kind of one iteration, the very best that we could do. And then the second time, we kind of got more people involved. We got funding to kind of retour the show, but we took funding from that to like redevelop it a little bit, you know, spend time kind of giving it more structure, more of a narrative, and kind of just make it kind of one whole package. And like, one of your questions is about kind of creativity. Like, we didn't really know what it was we were setting out to make, even though to get the money from the Arts Council, you need to pitch a very clear picture of what it is that you're going to do. But more often than not, anytime I've went to create something, I've started out with an idea, and by the time it's finished, it's kind of something completely different that in the process of making, you say something else. So sometimes you go into a project and you're like, you know what, this is something I've been pondering, and this is something I'd like to create a piece of work about. And then when you've actually made it and you look back at it, you're like, oh, that's not what I wanted to say at all. Like, this is what came out, you know. And I used to kind of fight that a little bit, being like, you know, oh no, this is what I want to say, so this is what I have to do. But that would often paralyze me, and I wouldn't be able to do anything, because I'd be like, no, that doesn't say that. But I'm like, sometimes I just need to kind of have a collection of like inspiration and data and ideas and I suppose kind of source material, see what it is, then I kind of create from that and see what the output is, and just be okay with that. Because if I'm not, I paralyze myself and I can't actually move forward. So I'm working on a project now at the moment that I gave in a pitch for, and the pitch is lovely and interesting and wonderful, and I wish I could have made that, but I haven't. I've made something else.
I love, because the creativity fascinates me in the sense that, like, I will, you know, when I was younger, I used to write songs. So you sit down and you write a song. Yeah, you kind of get the tune, or you get the lyrics first, whatever comes first. It doesn't really matter, and you work around that. Even as I got older, I was writing some short stories. That's one thing, right? But when it comes to like the physical side of it, you know, your own physical artistry coming into creativity, when you're even when you're doing the straps, I always found it interesting that you'd record yourself doing the straps at times. Was that like a sense of you just seeing about your technique, or was it more to do with like creativity, where you're trying to work on something?
All of the above. Like, yeah,
Okay.
you'd look at it for technique. If something wasn't working, there's kind of a balance. Sometimes when you're spinning, and it's like being a kid again, or when you would like swing on a swing or go on a merry-go-round or some kind of, you get that kind of like, I don't know if you ever got that like whoosh feeling where you're just like, oh my God, this is amazing.
Yeah. And
it feels incredible. And oftentimes when you do something like that in the air, it also looks incredible, but sometimes it doesn't. So sometimes you'll just be kind of improvising when you go up on the apparatus, and you're just trying to find places that feel good or look good, or you might try and embody some kind of an emotion or a quality or something that it is you're trying to say. And and music might help with that. And then sometimes you might feel, you're like, oh, you know what, it clicked in that moment. It clicked, and you'll go back and you'll have a look at it, and it will either confirm or deny whether your suspicions are correct. And sometimes it's right, and sometimes it's not.
Do you know what I love about it, Ronan? Because when I watch something like the things that you do, okay, it's something that I've never done, right? So to me, there's kind of two parts of it that are kind of fascinating. The first part, we'll talk about the wheel on this side of things. So when I look at the first part, I'm amazed at the kind of the beauty of it. You know, the movement that I have never achieved, but I look at it and I kind of go, I wouldn't have thought someone could do that. That's just my way of thinking. Like, I can't imagine being in that situation. But the other part is kind of a danger part for me. When I look at someone in it, all I think of is me face planting. Do you know? So to watch something that's completely out of the ordinary, and this is kind of going back to one of my earlier points of watching someone to do something that is, you know, way beyond what I could do, you know, until, you know, if I train, that's different. But just from me now talking about it, it's kind of amazing to think. But when I think of you playing for Roscommon and playing for your club, and there's people watching everybody on the pitch, when that's kind of drawn into you doing the sear wheel, for instance, is that something that you enjoy? Like, are you aware of like people looking at you going, I can't believe what is happening in front of me?
No, you're not. And look, it depends. Like sometimes, like there was one show that I had performed, I don't know, 150 times or something. And there was times that you're going through your routines and your performance, and you're literally like, you know, you've got muscle memory on where it is you need to go, and you're just thinking, right, I think I'll go to that sushi place this evening, you know, for dinner maybe, and then I need to go to the dry cleaners as well. So, but like, sometimes you get to that place, but it's not really a good place to be. You know, you want to be in the moment, which 90% of the time you are kind of in the moment, and whatever piece that is, like if it's a kind of a contemporary circus piece, that's more emotive, you could be quite internal, or you're kind of presenting whatever it is you need to present, whether that's physically or emotionally, and you're very much there. You're going to that place that you need to in order to give off whatever that is. And then maybe more, it might be a bit more of a ta-da kind of fun, more trick-based performance. And if that's what it is you're doing, you are very much aware that people are watching you, and sometimes you're reacting and responding to whatever it is that they're giving you. You know, like if they're impressed by a certain thing that you did, maybe you do a little bit more of it and whatever. But there's so many kind of styles and types, and I perform the different kind of elements as well. So it depends on where you're at.
So it's like, so it's choreography, not to almost precision. There's a kind of a leeway to allow you to react to what the audience are giving back.
Sometimes in more of those kind of spectacle performances where it's a little bit more interactive, like maybe on the street or at a wedding or a kind of a corporate event or something. But if it's in the theater, if it's more of a kind of a contemporary piece, you very much wouldn't be aware of the audience until like lights come up at the very end and there's an applause or not.
Yeah, I doubt that happens. But you've also done other shows, like you've done Sub Rosa and Riot. And I know you traveled quite a bit with Riot in particular. Is that something that you enjoy?
Yeah, that was, you know, it was kind of part of, it was a little idea in the back of my head when I started getting into it kind of as a hobby. I was like, fuck it, you know, this might take me places if I get this to a level of something. But then you were also conscious that you were starting out in a new discipline at the age of 26, and there are people who are highly proficient in this discipline as an 18 or 19-year-old. You know, that even if I work my socks off, I would still never be as good as them as an artist, if that's such a thing. But like, you know, technically and maybe aesthetically, you know, they may be better. but I'm like, fuck it, there's enough work out there for everybody, you know, like everybody can get theirs in this world. So I'm like, I'll have whatever mine is there. And so, yeah, getting to travel was amazing. That show was very successful, and I got to go around the world. And I really enjoy going to other places, not necessarily as a tourist, but when you're working, when you go to, we went to Sydney and we went to Melbourne, we did New York, Toronto. And when you're there as like working, you're kind of, you feel like nuts and bolts of the city, of that environment. You drop your bags at the hotel, and it's get to the theater, get to the get in, make sure everything is working. You're kind of talking to the local techies. They're sending you to their good spot for coffee or whatever. Like, you're already kind of in. You're not just a tourist who's kind of superficially kind of looking at the outer shell of whatever place it is that you're in. So I really enjoyed that, and you get to meet local workers. Like, every theater has the local grumpy techie who's inside a black box and kind of never gets to see sunlight all the time. So you get to meet all these people too. So that's kind of really nice. You get to peek behind the curtain of all these kind of bigger places.
It's funny you should talk about that, though. Just kind of a point on, you often hear artists traveling to different places, obviously on tour, and they kind of give out about just seeing the hotel room walls, and they go to the theater or the arena, whatever it is, and then they go back to hotel. But you kind of painted a different picture of it there, where it's kind of, you kind of flipped it around a little bit, where you enjoy seeing that the tech side of different places.
Yeah, like I always enjoy kind of peeping behind the curtain, for want of a better term. You know, it's like anything that you see someplace that you go is probably what those people want you to see. It's like somebody's social media, they create this, like, I don't know, this facade perhaps, like, but there's, you know, it's definitely curated and put there for you, and you will experience it one way if you see that. And it's a great way too. Like, I love going on holidays as well and not having to do anything. But I feel like when you went as a performer, and we were there, like, we were in places for like 3 weeks, a month at a time. So you kind of got to embed a little bit. You know, if you were just there for a weekend, it's hard because it's just get in and get out, and you may not to see. So that might be more that style of a performer. They might be talking about that, like they might just be moving on quicker. But no, I really enjoyed that. Really, really enjoyed it. And yeah, I liked it because I always kind of have this idea that I might live in another country for a while. Like, I would fucking love to live in Ireland for the summer, like, you know, spring, summer, or maybe summer, autumn, and then just like get the hell out of here for like winter, spring. Now, what kind of job is going to facilitate that? But like, you'd be wondering, you're like, well, where would I spend that other time? And when you get into a city or a place and you get to spend 3 weeks or a month working in that way, you get a feel for what it would be like to live and work there. You know, get up on a Monday and go to work and come back in the evenings. So I enjoyed that, because when you're on holiday someplace, you can't imagine what that would be like. So I guess I was looking at it through that lens. It's like, what would it be like to live here? Could I live here? And yes was the answer to most places.
Well, that's great. Like, yeah, and it's positive outlook on things. And I want to talk about your book, Worlds Apart, because I've only met you a few times, but I'd imagine that you're quite a person that likes to be on the go a bit and kind of obviously staying active with all the work that you do. How do you go from that to just sitting down and being alone with your thoughts and your story?
Yeah, that was hard. That wasn't, I mean, I got approached by a publishing company to create a fitness book, and I was kind of flattered, I suppose, and left that idea sit, but it didn't kind of really sit well with me. And when the moment came to, like, there was about a week out from submitting like a chapter or an idea for what they like said, would you be interested? And I was like, yeah, sure, leave it with me, I'll see what I can come up with. And the more I thought about it, the more it wasn't right. And then I kind of met a friend of mine, and just by pure chance, and we went for a bag of chips, and then I was telling them that this company had asked me about doing a book, and I'm like, I can't make that fitness book. And I was like, I have this idea for another thing, but I can't create it on my own. No more than yourself with the podcast. And you're saying that I forget his name, is it Dave?
John. Yeah.
And that he does work that you can't do. And
Absolutely.
And my friend says, have you ever considered a ghostwriter? And I said, well, I didn't, but now that you mention it, that would be perfect. And so they said that they wrote some stuff and I didn't know that about them. And so what I did was I recorded 3 stories, voice notes. Both of them were like the 3 of them were about 20 minutes long. And I sent them off and I said, whichever one of these 3 things you think you can make something of, like, have a go. And they did, and it became a sample chapter. And when the publishing company got back to me, they said, what have you got? And I said, I've got this other idea. And they said, no, we want the fitness book. And I said, well, I'm going to send you this anyway. Will you have a read of it? Because I've nothing else. And they read it and they said, you know what, if you can give 65,000 words of this quality of stuff, we'll print this. And so that's how Worlds Apart kind of came about. But I wouldn't have been able to create it myself. What that process was a load of voice notes. Initially starting off, we created a few chapters, and then what we did was we went away for a week and we sat down and we did a series of recorded interviews. We did 2 interviews every day, and we'd break that up in the middle with like a hike or a cycle or a surf or some kind of physical activity just to get out and break it up. And then they went off and created the written document that was what I had audio recorded, like that kind of way. So,
but you know that, right, when I have people on the podcast, and you're the first person I've actually kind of asked this, I suppose, but when I have people on the podcast to talk about kind of elements of their life, and I've often wondered, did they find it quite a strange thing to do, to come on and talk about it? But I'm going to like expand on it with you, because you sat down and, did interviews, obviously, but obviously talked into a dictaphone, or probably a phone. Now dictaphones are probably extinct, but you know what I mean? Like, to do the voice notes. Did you find it kind of a strange or cathartic, or I'm trying to think of, there could be many words I could use, really.
It was definitely cathartic, because you were now exploring it again, because you can often think something, but to say it out loud is an awful lot different, for whatever reason that is. And then, so when you say it out loud, I often found myself, and I'd be telling the story or telling something, I would almost try and not apologize, but like correct it. I'd say something and they go, but it wasn't like what I just said. Yeah. It was like not as bad as that, or it was not as good as that, or you always try to take back from whatever it is you had just said. But then when you see it written down, it's another thing altogether, and not just written down by you, but you have told somebody a story, they've written it down and shown it back to you, and you're like, fuck, is that what I said? Because it's not like that. So it was a hugely cathartic experience. Like, my mom, when I was showing I checked everything in the book, like I showed it to my family before it went like to publishing or anything, and she was like, could you not just have gone to fucking counseling or something? Would it not have been cheaper or something? I don't know, but it definitely would have been cheaper.
Yeah.
But, it was hugely cathartic, but it wouldn't have worked with just anybody. Like the person that I worked with, I couldn't think of anybody better. You very much trusted them to do the right job, because actually we went away for a week to just kind of work on this, and maybe like 2 days in, we went down to a local cinema, and afterwards we went for a couple of drinks, and the couple of drinks turned into like 4 or 5. And I was getting jolly anyways, and then it was like, oh, remember that story I was telling you earlier on? Right, well, after that, like, this is the bit now I couldn't tell you earlier on, and I added on a bit to the story, and they were like, we've just wasted 2 fucking days. What are you doing telling me this now? You need to tell me all of this when we're going through it, and then trust me to know what not to put in there. But like, when we're telling this entire story, we need to be able to have that piece of information to be able to hint at it or to kind of create the story around that, so that it's like, we know that happened. We don't say that happened, and we don't put anybody's name to it. And I was like, all right, okay. So we had to kind of scratch a few interviews or revisit a few stories.
Well, it's funny to hear you talk about it in that way, because obviously I've been through, therapy myself. And when I'm telling the therapist the situation or a story or whatever it might be, I do feel myself holding back in it. And I know if I tell the full thing, there might be, more of a breakthrough on the other side, but you still hold it back.
Yeah.
I don't know why that is. Like,
yeah, you're like, no, this is one of those internal thoughts. I can't actually say that out loud, because they're going to judge me and they're going to think that I'm the weird person.
Yeah. And the thing is, for you, Ronan, your book is going out like into the world. It's not like my conversations are in a room with one person, but I can't imagine doing it when knowing that the book is going to go out. Like, I saw your book in Easton's. It's like, I know that guy, this kind of situation where it's out there, but
yeah,
I can't, there's no way that you can talk about yourself like that and not kind of hold a little bit back, just to protection, just purely protection, really.
Yeah, well, with the individual I did it with, we just let everything out. And then I trusted them to make the right calls. And it's excuse me, it had to get to that level in order for it to be anything. Otherwise it was just kind of going to be noise. Like,
yeah.
But more often than not, like when you have a heart-to-heart with somebody and somebody all of a sudden reveals something that is highly personal or something, and you can know by them that it's a huge thing to let out, and then you realize, you're like, yeah, but that's not like, it's not such a big deal, or it's like, but it's grand. Or sometimes you might have even known it about them, or sometimes you might have guessed it, or but it often helps. And sometimes if you didn't know it or didn't guess it, you might be like, oh my God, I had no idea that you were experiencing that too. I'm going through that same thing, but was too embarrassed to say.
Yeah.
And it's like, we tend not to have that honest conversations with people. And I know we have like close friends and then we have other friends, but I think the pandemic was quite telling when we'd meet people. You meet them on the street, and after you spoke about the weather and the pandemic itself, like, we didn't have all that superficial stuff to talk about, like, oh, I was doing this thing, or I went here and did that. Like, oftentimes we have to like get through all those conversations about the superficial stuff to actually get down to the kind of the meat and potatoes of what's going on with us. And we didn't have that in the pandemic to get through. So it was really awkward. It's like, well, how are you doing? And you're like, I either say fine here, or I fucking spill my guts, and I really don't want to spill my guts. It's like,
yeah, and you just say fine, and it's just it's you go to immediately, and it's like what you're saying there about like not knowing something about someone or knowing how they feel, but they're not kind of giving it over to you. It's because they might be like catastrophizing this idea in their minds. It's not as big as it is. Like, going back to what you were talking about with the football, with the laces, and all these things we can catastrophize without kind of saying it. So we'll kind of just go around the bare bones of what we really feel, and we don't go into the actual, as you say, meat and potatoes of it. And I think that those conversations were and still are very telling when you do meet someone you haven't seen for a year and a half because of the pandemic, and you're like, so yeah, how's things? Or and there's nothing.
Yeah,
it's weird.
Yeah.
But listen, so apart from all that, obviously your book is about what we've kind of spoken about, really, and all the things that you've done. What do you like to do in your spare time?
I find it hard to do nothing.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to work on that. I'm trying to get better at doing nothing. There was a time where there wasn't a second I wasn't listening to a podcast or fucking trying out some new fucking thing on nutrition, or like trying to make your life better, listening to a Tim Ferriss or something, just trying to like be better and kind of improve yourself for, and I don't know why we feel like we need constant improvement, like, and just kind of sitting with my thoughts, because I know whenever there's like a a quiet moment, I'll try and reach for the phone, or like I'll ring somebody, or I'm trying to read a little bit more. I like to go down. I'm lucky to live beside the river. I go for a swim whenever I can. Going for a walk. Like more recently, since I stopped performing so much, and like the pandemic happened, I've been at home with my partner an awful lot more, and I'm like, oh, that's been really nice. And we hadn't seen a whole pile of each other before that, so like just sitting down and watching some shit telly together, like something that I would have never have put a value on, is totally valuable, you know.
Yeah, and like
series together, you know, it's like having that one show that you watch together, you know, and if it come on in somebody else's house, it's like, nope, I'm saving that now for the two of us. We're just watching that together.
Yeah,
so like,
I think you like, it's funny how we all have like ideas of what nothing is, you know, and I think a lot of people tend to be kind of going towards your approach, because I think the same thing of like TV and just sit there and watch some, you know, something that doesn't really go in or stay in or whatever. But like to sit and think with your thoughts is like the scariest things for some people. And I actually don't mind anymore, but you know, a few years ago it terrified me.
Yeah. And it's difficult, but it's like, what are we afraid of? Like, and maybe we're afraid of those, like something real and something true coming through, because I often wonder sometimes if we're so caught up in the superficial because we don't want to be with our own thoughts. We don't kind of want that stillness. And you'd mentioned meditation earlier. I'm not sure if it was before we hit record or whatever, but like I've always kind of struggled with that, and I've tried to follow an app, but I've never been drawn to do that, you know, where you've got a moment and you say, oh, I'll do this. That would always be something that I'd have to like force myself to do. And also that's like trying to get rid of the thoughts. You're like trying to clear everything. So sometimes it's nice. There's a thing called morning pages. I don't know if you ever heard of it.
No.
And it's just a kind of a brain dump in the morning before you eat, before you do anything. The idea behind it is you'd have a notebook and you write 3 pages worth of stuff, and it doesn't have to be about anything. It can be literally sit down and I'm Derek Wheatley and I'm writing this because Ronan Brady mentioned it on a podcast. I'm not sure what's going to come out, but you keep writing until you don't know what to write, and kind of what wants to come out starts to come out.
Yeah.
You kind of get through all the stuff, and it might be just like writing out your list of things that you need to do, but you're supposed to do it before the day gets in the way of all the things that you have to do. But tried it for a while. It's hard to do, but when you sit down and then you do kind of get into your heady thoughts, it's amazing what will be presented. You'll write something down and you're like, Jesus, I didn't know that was something that I was thinking about subconsciously. It's almost like your subconscious ends up kind of coming out onto the page. But you nearly want, similar to like what you were saying, talking to a counselor, or like not revealing everything. You need to kind of put everything down on this with the assumption that nobody's ever going to read it. And it's not for you to read back either. It's kind of just, it's like clearing out the fog, you know, clearing out kind of anything that might be in the way of kind of thinking about whatever it is you might be thinking about.
Wow. It sounds interesting.
Yeah. Worth having a go. I couldn't write. My hand would start to cramp because I was like never used to writing. So I was typing it, like, so.
Nobody writes anymore, though. So that's right. They're all typing. But so kind of one last question. So what are the future plans then for performing? Is there any in place yet?
No, like at the moment, I'm trying to change up what it is I'm doing. Like I was, full-time performing, and the pandemic put an absolute halt to that. But I was trying to pull back from the amount at which I was doing, because when you talk about anxiety and shoelaces and whatever else, like I used to have an awful lot of anxiety around where the next job was coming from, where the next gig was, what my income was going to be. Like you get paid for something and you're like, well, my calendar isn't that full, so has this got to last 2 months or 6 months? Or there was just constant stress and anxiety, and I had lost any kind of a routine, whether that was eating on the road or like sleeping or training, and like a routine was gone out the window. And I tend to work better with a routine and kind of being set, and I was on the move so much. It was hard to kind of get roots. It was like, I was only popping home nearly to kind of wash my clothes and like go again, that kind of thing. And so I want to kind of set roots again, and I'm going to go back teaching. And I was spent the last year substitute teaching in a school, and this position since came up, and I applied for that and I got it. And it's just really good school and progressive, and there seems to be like some good ideas in it, and like open scope for doing other things outside of the curriculum and that. So this year now I'm gonna teach there, and I'm going to see if I can like fit my creative endeavors in between, like whether that's in the evenings, the weekends, the midterm breaks, whatever, or the summertime. Like I like the idea of being able to just kind of have one big project that I could spend a month in the summer kind of working on, and touring around. I've always had this mind to just kind of create a short one-man piece, something that I could perform anywhere, like a show in a bag. That you could do with the car, you could show up, you could do it little bits of festivals, you could perform in a small space that didn't need rigging, didn't need lighting, didn't need sound, something quite portable. Like that. I don't know what that is, but like I'd be afraid to start at it because I'm like, I don't know what it's supposed to be, but like anything I've done has taught me that you just need to start and something will come of it. And even if it's wrong, you can kind of redevelop it or whatever. So that's something long term I'd like to have, just a piece that I had for myself. That if I wanted, even if it was on holidays, that you could just kind of like start doing in the street, that might be a bit of movement, a bit of spoken. Like I'm not actually sure, but I'd like to have a go at that.
But it's kind of like you're constantly evolving. Whether it's what you do in your full time, but then also what you do with your creativity and stuff like that. And that's kind of the goal of everyone. You don't want to stay still. Like, you want to evolve and keep doing what you're doing, especially for people with creative minds. That's the most important thing, I think. Ronan, you've been an absolute star for coming on the podcast. We're delighted to have you.
Very welcome. Thanks for asking me.
Of course. And listen to me, if you don't mind, right, because you paused again, right, but I just want to get a photo with you at the end. So while I'm like signing off and all that, could you pop on and back in if you don't mind, if that's all right?
No problem.
Thanks a million, Ronan. So obviously, thanks very much to John, as always, for everything he does. Thanks to my mum, my dad, my granddad, Jer and Calvin. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you would. We're also on Instagram and Facebook. If you'd like to follow us there, I put in some art and I put in some books and I put in some music and things like that. We're also on Twitter. Obviously, everything goes on the same kind of thing. So Spotify, Apple, Anchor, Google Podcasts, etc. And always thanks to everyone for listening to our episode 81. We're getting up there in numbers. And as I say, Ronan, thanks a million again.
You're very welcome.
Right, everyone, we'll all chat to you next week. Take care and have a good one. Bye.